Family disputes can make us feel isolated and vulnerable. Maybe you're going through a divorce or a legal dispute about your kids. Perhaps you've spent hours on Google or have even posted anonymously on Facebook to see what others have to say. But are you getting the actual information and support that you're looking for? Our podcast, Legal Lounge, aims to dispel misinformation and downright bad legal information to empower anyone with questions about their family, their children, their finances, their marriage, and the law. As a team focused exclusively on family law matters, we aim to help listeners not only with the information they need, but also with the hope that their situation has a solution. Short disclaimer, please note this podcast is for educational purposes only, and the information should not be relied upon as legal advice or for legal purposes. Welcome back to the Legal Lounge. I'm excited to have my friend Bernadette join me today. She is a whiz when it comes to not only women empowerment, but finances. Bernadette, tell us more.
Thank you so much. Also, thank you for calling me a whiz because I'm totally in this wicked phase right now. So I'm the whiz. Awesome. Well, thank you so much for having me. I'm Bernadette Joy. I'm based here in Charlotte, North Carolina, and I am the founder and author of Crush Your Money Goals. And I teach people simple, practical money habits that you can use to become financially free. And a lot of people think that financial literacy is the game, but what I actually teach is financial freedom.
I love that because I have a lot of people wondering, okay, on the Legal Lounge, is it just conversations between lawyers? And I'm like, no, actually, it's conversations that affect not only your legal rights, but your financial circumstances. And
Absolutely.
I love that idea of financial freedom. It's empowering in a way.
Yeah. And, I love having these types of conversations because there's such an intersection between legal things and finances. And I love that you are creating a platform where people can have these cross-functional conversations. And for me specifically, I know that I'm not an attorney, although sometimes I think I am because I watched Law & Order or whatever. Yeah. But what I really encourage people to do is to set up a team. So all of my clients, if I'm working with them on things like estate planning or family planning or getting married or getting divorced, we always make sure that they are having the conversations from a legal perspective too. So the fact that we're having a two-way conversation today is awesome.
Yes, and that's exactly what I want the listener to take away, most importantly, is that we are tools for them to use full circle, right? Mm-hmm. It's not just you just need an attorney for going through a divorce. No, you need someone to help you with your finances as well, especially if it's more than just, figuring out a budget. It's actually figuring out, okay, my chapters are changing. Maybe marriage is ending, so that chapter is ending. How then do I start the next chapter on a good foot? And finances is a big part of that.
A huge part of it. I mean, I like to tell my clients that when we are going for financial freedom, we really have to act as the CEO of our lives. Mm-hmm. And so as a CEO, you need either a board of advisors or you need a solid CEO team. So that includes your attorney, that includes someone who's helping you with finances, that includes your therapist, yes, especially during things like that. And what I really love about, what I've learned about you and your philosophy is that you're really looking at this as a holistic approach. And that's the way that I think about it too with finances, is that especially when you're going through any life change, the first thing that I tell people to look at after they talk to their therapist. Yes. So actually the second thing that I ask people to look at is how is this going to impact your finances? And then what changes do we need to make in your budget or in your investment goals or in your short-term savings to be able to accommodate this change as you go through that transition? Because I can't tell you, and I hate to say this, I can't tell you how many women in particular that I talk to who say that even though they know they're not supposed to be in this marriage or they know they're not supposed to be in this toxic job or whatever it is, that they stay in it because they don't think they can afford to leave.
Yes. I can't echo that enough because I have individuals, especially prospective clients, come in, sit down with me, go through a consultation, they learn about their legal rights, and then they say, I don't think I can afford this. And that just hits my heart. Yeah, because you should not be forced to stay in an unhealthy or possibly even dangerous marriage just because you can't afford it. Finances, to your point, should create a form of freedom, not chains keeping you down.
I have some clients in the past 2 years where some of our financial goals have shifted, and I'm going to say this again, particularly for women. So many of my clients, they are focused on making sure their kids are taken care of, making sure that their parents are taken care of, making even the husband that they don't like very much right now, making sure that they're okay.
Yeah.
And a lot of the work that I have to do is to say, hey, you are actually the first person and only person that is responsible for your own financial plan. And so consider that for all those people to be okay, you need to be okay first. And it's often a very tough conversation where we're saying, you know what, we may have to pause the kids' college fund for you to put away savings, to be able to move out of the house, to be able to afford an attorney, to do this right. And then the other thing that makes me really crazy is I have a lot of clients who are trying to shortcut the attorney fees and trying to like negotiate their own divorces and all this other stuff. I'm like, no, sis. Like, there's a reason that professionals do this.
Yeah.
And you're thinking, oh, it's going to cost me this much money to go forward with like a legal proceeding or something like that. You know, it's going to cost you tens of thousands of dollars down the road if you don't have someone who's advocating for, you know, your assets and advocating for your rights and advocating to make sure that you are holistic 10 years down the line. Don't just think about the immediate future.
Agreed, 110%. I mean, it's come up a lot, and I have sat with a prospective client saying, I don't know if I can afford this. I don't know if I can move out. I don't know if I can do X, Y, Z. But can you afford not to?
That's right.
And as an attorney, I will sit with my client and try to do at least a very high level cost benefit analysis, because if the marital estate is worth $2,000, we're not filing an equitable distribution claim to pursue division of property. Okay. But at the very least, we're still going to get you out. We're still going to get you that divorce. We're still going to get you custody of your children. And on the flip side, let's say you are entitled to a number of retirement accounts or equity in the house, which is where we find a lot of the marital assets that can be divided. And I remember I had one client one time. I love her. She knows who she is. And she can find the podcast.
Hello.
She's not here in North Carolina anymore, but she knows who she is. And I remember sitting down with her in the initial consultation. And she said, Theresa, I just don't know how much is in retirement. I'm like, but there is retirement. She's like, yes. I'm like, and is there a house? Yes, but I don't know if there's much equity. And so we did some sketches on a piece of paper. I said, look, retain me to at least do the investigation. She did.
Yes.
Long story short, she walked away with over a $270 check, both in retirement as well as cash funds from the sale of a house. And yes, she did have to pay. She had to pay 5 figures worth of attorney's fees. And I get it. She was bulking at it. Every time we sent her an invoice, she's like, what is this, Theresa? But cost benefit wise, she netted ahead over $200,000. And that's where I sit here and I say, yes, she just wanted to walk away. Mm-hmm. But I'm like, yes, sit down with me so we can at least do that analysis.
Yes.
And because I want you to be able to start that next chapter with that lump of sum that you're entitled to.
Yes. I'm so glad there are people like you who are doing this type of work, because what I also found, and I've had to maybe have that pre-conversation before I push them toward the attorney, is a lot of times these women are avoiding this because finances have been overwhelming or challenging for them before, and I hate to say it, but there are still a lot of women, even when they were making 6 figures or whatever, they're still treating the husband as head of household. Mm-hmm. When the thought of like dealing with all this financial stuff, like it literally causes them like this pain in their chest. And what I found is that a lot of women are, like you said, they're looking at the costs, but they're not looking at it as an investment into their future. And that's what I really want people to understand, is that you're not paying for just the attorney's time. And same thing for me. You're not just paying for my time. You're not just paying for my brain, right, to help you solve these problems. You're paying for a solid plan and the actual resources to invest now, so that 5, 10, 20 years down the road, you will be in a different stage of life that requires all of those things.
Yeah.
But a lot of people think very short-sighted, and that goes for, getting divorced. It goes for investments. It goes for education oftentimes, where people are like, oh, well, I don't want to pay for this now. Like, I don't want to pay for coaching now. I don't want to pay for an attorney now. I don't want to pay for this because it's going to cost me a lot of money. Mm-hmm. But like you said, can you afford to keep living this way? Can you keep doing the same type of life? Like, is this really what you want? And that's why I decided to become a financial coach versus an advisor, because I get to use my psychology degree a lot more.
Yeah.
And I get to get into the brains of these people to say, all right, well, why are you discounting your emotional labor right now? Why are you discounting all the invisible labor that you've done over these last couple of years? And there's a value to that too. But financial advisors don't talk to you, nor do they really care about your mental health or whatever. They just care about your investments. And I'm so grateful that there are people like you, and I've talked to a lot of other people in other states and stuff, that this is starting to become the trend.
Yes.
But we still got a lot of work to do.
Yeah, and I think it's that holistic approach where it's like, yes, I can push paper through a courthouse like nobody's business, but we're not just paper pushers, especially as family law attorneys. I like to say, and I've said this before, if my listeners recognize it, as a family law attorney, I'm being welcomed into their family. I'm being welcomed into their personal situation, very intimate situation. I have an obligation then in that position to make sure I'm not just sitting here saying, okay, we can sue for this form of legal relief, but maybe we try this route. Maybe this will be better because then the children won't see both parents in protracted litigation for years. And go one step further, maybe this is even cheaper. So it saves you money at the end of the day that can then be put into that college savings account.
Yes. I'm going to give you a prime example from one of my favorite clients. She knows who she is. But she divorced a guy years and years ago, and it's the father of her 2 children. And since then, she's met the most amazing husband. They're such a great team. They built this amazing business together. And so I have been working with her for years to get her out of her day job, get her full-time into this business, and to help her rearrange her assets so that she could, in fact, retire when she wants to retire.
Yeah.
And then one day finds out that the ex-husband passed away all of a sudden.
Oh, wow.
And she was still the executor on his will.
Oh, wow.
So imagine having to be the executor of your ex-husband's will, right? And among that, there's all this other stuff that was happening. She had to put down her dog. There's just 100 things that happen. And so that you're thinking okay, divorce is hard. I hate to say it, y'all, there'll be other hard times after you get past divorce.
Yeah.
So think about the fact that you think it feels like the hardest thing in your life right now, but there'll be other things that come down the road.
Yes.
And for me as her financial coach, I had to sit down with her and say, hey, guess what? This is not all on you.
Yeah.
And you have someone else who's going to help support you in some of these things. But she was feeling so overwhelmed, and rightfully so. There's all these different things. And I said to her, I was like, by the way, the fact that she said to me, I'm feeling really unmotivated in the business right now. I don't feel motivated to do my finance. I'm like, it's not that you're not motivated. It's because this is a lot of stuff.
Yes.
And also you are now responsible for cleaning up the mess for a lot of men right now. This is not you. This is the patriarchy.
Yeah.
Okay? Because if not for you, none of this stuff would get done.
Yeah.
So give yourself some grace and say, okay, actually, what is really truly my responsibility? And then how can I ask for help on some of these things? And so we put together a plan not only for the finances and for the business, but we're like, okay, we need to free you up even more time from the business, and we need to rearrange your finances so that you have a little bit more breathing room to actually be the matriarch of your family, which is what you really want to do at this stage of your life.
Yeah.
And I say that story because for anyone who's going through this really difficult time, it feels like this is all there is.
Yeah.
But I want you to actually believe that you might find love later down the road. You might actually leave that job. You might actually build a business. In her case, you might become a millionaire after this. So protect your future self, not just right now.
Amen. I can't tell you how often, and I see it often, where my clients never getting divorced again. I'm never doing this again. I'm never going to even have a romantic relationship again. And, obviously I'm still practicing law, practicing over a decade. But the one thing I tell most of my clients is when you are going to get back into a romantic relationship, I want to meet them, 1. And 2, if you get married, we're going to do a prenup.
Yes,
and it's so funny because more than one has come back to me and said, hey, I need you to meet someone. I'm like, oh, is this a prospective client? And they're like, no. It's my +1. And I'm like, I knew it. It would take time. It will take time. But to your point, when someone is stuck in the chapter of separation and divorce, maybe they haven't even decided to get out of this unhealthy relationship, but they're still in it. and they're seeing all the treachery that they're going through, all the mud that they're having to wade through because they have to not only make sure the food is on the table at the end of the night, but they also have to make sure all the bills are paid and the kids are brought to their extracurricular activities, and the husband is still being demanding, or the wife, or whatever it may be. It's one of those situations of, we as the professionals, your team that's here to help you, can see the possibilities in your next chapter, even if you can't.
That's right.
And it's okay that you can't.
Mm-hmm. And it's normal that you can't.
It's normal. Mm-hmm. It's actually scientifically, biologically normal that you can't, because you're dealing with so much. But on the flip side, if you can find those professionals, that board of directors like you referenced earlier, to help you through these processes, that although that new chapter, all those possibilities could be possibilities for you.
Yes. And what I think has been really eye-opening for me, so I really started going full-fledged into coaching back in 2020, and the amount of things that we just as a universe have had to endure in the last 5-ish years, it's brought to light for a lot of my clients. Specifically, I tend to have this target group of women who are high-performing, kind of matriarchs of the family, tend to have a lot of things to have to juggle. And then the pandemic came up, and then, inflation and housing prices changed. And then more recently, like the election in the US, and a lot of women started reaching out to me and started realizing, like, this ain't it. Mm-hmm. This life that we're living right now ain't it. Mm-hmm. And I need to do something different. And what I found was that a lot of people are still playing by this old, like, rule book of what financial freedom looks like in America. Meaning, like, you have a nice house and you have that, like, very successful husband and the 2.5 kids, and and then you're supposed to be okay. Well, weird thing was that a lot of these women came to me and they had the successful husband. They had the really nice house, and they had, like, the nice job, but the house was out of their means. The husband was not really present or supportive, right? Yeah. And, then everything that they're trying to do just feels like more and more expensive, and that job that they thought was the thing that was going to get them financial freedom is the thing that feels like chains right now.
Yeah.
And what I love doing in these conversations is, like, saying, let's just, like, wipe the slate clean here. Why did you want that house so bad? Why did you marry this person? Why did you think that this was the job? And no one has ever asked them those questions before.
Yeah.
And a lot of times their answer is like, I thought that was what I was supposed to do.
Yes.
And actually, real freedom, in my opinion, aside from the finances, is actually doing what you want to do, regardless if anyone else is doing it.
I'm just going to add on to there, and I want whatever you want to do to be supported by anything you're bound to legally. Mm-hmm. So I know you were just raving about the prenup a moment ago.
Oh my gosh.
I need to get a bracelet that says prenup. And my husband will laugh at that, and yes, we have a prenup. But to that point, there are so many things that society says what we can and cannot do, but it's up to us whether or not we follow that. Go one step further. There are things that the law will say you can and cannot do, especially when it comes to marriage, especially when it comes to divorce. And there are legal tools. And this is what I want to really stress here, is that I'm not a divorce attorney. I'm a family law attorney, meaning I want to use all the family laws to benefit the goals of my clients. And that starts with the prenup conversation. And I'm not saying every couple out there needs to get a prenup necessarily, but if, for example, the female in the marriage wants to pursue becoming a business owner and wants it to be her sole and separate project from her husband, I'm not saying don't get married. Get the prenup.
That's right.
And that will solidify that. That's what I did. Mm-hmm. My businesses are my businesses. Mm-hmm. And my husband is like, I prefer it that way. Right?
Yeah.
And there's so many ways we can get creative as well. And that's just one tool. That's the prenup. There's the tool called the postnuptial agreement that a lot of people don't know about.
Can we discuss this for a second?
Sure.
Because I only found out about postnups like 2 years ago. Mm-hmm. And it was specifically because another creator, coach friend of mine was going through a really tough divorce, and she had completely blown up her business. Like, it was like, I mean, she was crushing it. Mm-hmm. And someone advised her to go get a postnup, and she didn't know that was possible. I didn't know that was, nobody, like, and she's Latina too. So, like, this is all, like, women of color, like, we don't have the conversation about prenups or postnups because for me, like, growing up Catholic or whatever, like, you don't do that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right? Like, that's not God's way or whatever, right? So I actually followed her journey of, she was sharing all this information about, like, why you should get a postnup, whatever. And she actually posted her divorce legal proceedings of her signing off on the divorce paperwork. And the judge basically said, well, this was clean and easy because you had the foresight to do a postnup.
Yes.
Right? So if you're already married, like I am, right, consider doing that. Yeah. And it's not that, oh my gosh, like, I'm expecting us to break up or I'm expecting us to get divorced. What I like about it as a financial coach is it forces the conversation around that discovery process. So the assets and all the things that you didn't know about before, they got to come out when you do the postnup. But it also forces a conversation of, like, well, what are the legal boundaries and also the financial boundaries of how we're going to conduct our financial conversations going forward. Yeah. So one great example that I love, like, that someone had mentioned to me was that they, in their postnup said, in our postnup, like, whenever someone is deciding to do a spending decision over X amount of dollars, they have to discuss it with their spouse, right? And I was like, I remember hearing this for the first time as a financial coach. I'm like, but that's what I tell people to do, but there's nothing legal.
Yeah.
So I'm like, you're telling me I can put this in legal paperwork?
Yes,
this is great.
This is exactly what we're saying. And postnup itself can also be creative. It's a different set of laws. But one point is the postnup specifically is a spousal agreement not contemplating separation or divorce. It literally is to create a understanding between the spouses of how you're going to organize finances, maybe property ownership, maybe debt distribution, maybe business and investment risks. And that postnup can be in place so that everyone's on the same page. And that's it. Now, if a separation occurs, yes, a judge can reference it. Attorneys can reference it. And it's a great tool to keep things streamlined. But honestly, let's not even talk about divorce. Let's not even think about divorce. Let's just talk about the here and now, about what you want to do financially to pursue that financial freedom. And it does involve those tricky conversations. And hopefully, if your spouse is supportive of you, they will want to go through that process with you so everyone's on the same page. Because at the end of the day, I would argue that would, in fact, protects the family.
Yes. And I personally, in hindsight, had I known about these types of things, I would have engaged with an attorney sooner than later with my parents. So I'm the 8th of 9 kids, and my dad had 7 kids in his first marriage and 2 kids, me and my brother, in his second marriage with my mom, right? And when my father passed away very suddenly, all this stuff came up of just like, theoretically, the thought was that, everything would go to my mom, like a lot of marriages, like when someone passes away, it just like assume that all the assets will go to the spouse. But my mom asked me one day, she's like, do you think your other siblings are gonna like want things or and I was like, honestly, I don't know. And gosh, it would be great to have something in writing from Dad that said, this is my intent for all of these things. And so as someone who now was on the other side of like the child of a relationship that didn't have legally binding type of things, if not for you, think about your family and your kids and other people who might be impacted by what your marriage and your marital assets constitute of. And make sure that is in writing and with someone who actually knows how to write it properly.
And I'm gonna stress that last point you just said, Bernadette, because a lot of people have, and luckily this is the case, have talked about wills and estate planning, and more people are getting estate plans. However, not everyone is also combining that with the family planning.
That's correct.
And actually, I want to say one of our very first episodes on Legal Lounge, I sat down with our attorney, Tiffany Bird, and we just talked about family planning because, yes, estate planning, drafting your will, your powers of attorneys, critical, right? Because we need to know what's going to happen at the day of your death. But what about your family? To your point, a number of children, a spouse, we need to make sure all those pieces are working together. So you really want on your board of directors an estate planning attorney and a family law attorney, hopefully someone that maybe even does both, or a firm that does
does both.
The does both. And go one step further, different states have different laws. So you want to make sure you're finding that person that applies to you, that's best fit for your board of directors based on where you live, your family circumstance, and all of your goals.
Yes. And shout out to all of the estate planning attorneys because that is like, to me, that is God's work of just like, wow, you have to think about all these different things. And my husband and I'm turning 40 next year. My husband is 43. And we did our first estate plan like 10 years ago.
Yeah.
And we didn't have a ton of assets back then. And we just redid our estate plan just this past year. And we're like, wow. Like we looked at our old will and our new will. And we're like, whoa, we had a little bit of a glow up. Like good for us.
Pat on the back.
Good for us. But also some of the people in our old will like either passed away or not here anymore, or like, I shouldn't say this, but there are some people in our old will that I'm like, I don't really like them that much anymore.
Yeah. Take them out. Take them out of there.
Take them out of there. And so I highly, highly recommend that, to all of my clients and people who are trying to be on a financial freedom journey. It sounds very daunting, but actually doing an estate plan, if you come at it from the perspective of, again, this is not about when I die, this is about how I'm living right now.
Yeah.
It actually forces us to make some really good decisions. And if you also want to make it fun, like part of my will was like, when I die, like there will be a karaoke party, and this is like what it's gonna be. And my attorney was just like, oh, like I want to go to that karaoke party, So it doesn't always have to be like doom and gloom. It's not always about like preparing for the worst. It's actually about creating the life that is best for you in the present.
It's interesting you say that because I was sitting with my mom at one point and we're going over her stuff. She's in her early 70s. And I am the attorney. I took my emotions out of it. She was headed into surgery. I'm like, where's your power of attorney? And she's like, well, I have this one. And it was a really old one when she lived in a different state. I was like, no. We have to fix all this. And I'm going through it and I'm just asking her these hard questions like, who do you want to make your medical decisions? Should you not be, cognitive? And she's like, well, I don't want you to be second to your brother. And I'm like, well, we're not going to make the decision together. It's okay if it's my brother. It's fine. On the flip side, who do you want this and that? And we went through the whole thing. And at one point, she's like, you're just so business about it. You're just so like almost like insensitive about it. I'm like, I'm not insensitive. It's because I love you and I care for you so much. And as an attorney who's seen the worst side of when this paperwork is not in place, I need us all to avoid that.
That's right.
And so it's because I love you. I'm asking these tough questions in a very non-empathetic way.
Yeah.
And we got it done and she's fine and we're good and family's happy. It doesn't mean that it's, to your point, to be a detrimental conversation or a negative conversation, but it's meant to plan for the here and the now. Because guess what? We're actually more likely to live tomorrow than we are to die.
Ooh, that should be on a magnet on your refrigerator.
Exactly.
I had a similar conversation with my in-laws. They're going through like a significant change in their lives. They're deciding to move out of their home that they've been at for 30 years. And similarly to you, talking about having conversations as a daughter, like trying to convince your in-laws, like your mother-in-law, like no mother-in-law wants to listen to their daughter-in-law about anything about money.
Yeah.
And my only saving grace was like, I kind of wrote a book about this, so I think I know something about this, Mom.
Just a few things.
Yeah, right? And I will have to say, 8 years ago when we first started having these conversations with my in-laws, like it was really hard, like to get them to listen, to get them to, consider the fact that we're not just saying this to be like insensitive or anything. It was because I was just like, I want you to see your best life. I want you to live your life now. They had big concerns about, we want to treat all the sons equally. And we had to have a conversation with them to say, AJ and I are good. Yeah. Like, don't worry about us. I want you to actually spend your money now. Like, we're fine.
Yeah.
And those were the way it was received back then. And also, if you've noticed from this podcast, like I'm pretty blunt and I'm not like the very demure, like trad wife kind of daughter-in-law, And so it took us 8 years to get to a point where just this past Thanksgiving, when they came over for the holidays, that we actually had an adult-to-adult conversation. They were asking us questions about like, well, what should we be thinking about when we move? What should we be thinking about when, if and when one of us passes away, like all of these other things. And I was just like, wow, like I'm so I wish it happened sooner, but better late than never.
Yes.
And kudos to you for having those tough conversations, because I can't tell you, there's a lot of clients that I also work with who are very capable, very smart women, but in their households or in their family structure, they're still like the daughter or the wife versus the capable, smart businesswoman or capable and smart financial expert or attorney. And sometimes people in your immediate circle don't see you as that. So don't give up if they're not receptive after the first conversation. It takes a while.
It does take a while. And I guess on the flip side, I know you're speaking a lot to women specifically, but I think for the other side of the conversation, the other person, to our men out there, to our other spouses, to our family members, it's all meant out of love, right? And it's meant to create a more cohesive unit so that we're all growing and getting stronger together. I remember back in high school when they used to yell at us on the track team, you are as weak as your weakest runner or your weakest player. And it's like, okay, even the weakest player needs to be strengthened. And yes, we historically have let our wives, if you will, be the ones who don't know much about finances and don't have access to the bank accounts or don't learn more about investments and all of these tools that, you're very good at explaining. And the tide has changed. Let us all build each other up. And that literally creates not only a better society, but a better world to pass on to our children.
Yes. The number one question I get from women and men who are in relationships, committed relationships, is how do I get my partner on the same page? And this goes for both men and women, is that you can't tell your spouse what you want them to do. You just have to show them.
Yeah.
And what I mean specifically about that, when I was having that conversation with my husband, I 8 years ago said, I want to become debt-free. I don't want to live with this like mortgage debt forever. I don't want to live with the student loan debt forever. And his response was, but everyone we know has all this stuff. So like it's normal and it's fine. I was like, then you can be normal. I'm going to go be debt free.
There you go.
I'm going to go build this business. If you want to come along, great. If you don't, then I'm going to keep going.
Yeah.
And a lot of people would look at that as being kind of like, butting heads in a marriage. You're supposed to do everything together and be on the same page. No, actually, sometimes someone has to set the vision. And then someone can choose to like go along with that vision. And just because you're married doesn't mean you have to have the exact same vision.
Correct.
But they can't be conflicting.
Yeah. So they can't be conflicting, but they don't have to be exactly the same.
That's right.
And both parties have to respect each other.
Yeah.
Because that happens all the time. My husband literally last week, I want a new TV for the living room. I'm like, we don't need a new TV. Lordy, and we already have 3 TVs. So let me preface this. This is not like we have one dinky TV. And I was like, we don't need a new TV. However, I do want to celebrate our anniversary in like the Bahamas or somewhere nice. So my response was, did you book the travel to the Bahamas? He's like, oh, well, I'm working on it. Okay. Well, then I guess we can't buy that TV then. And that was it.
And we just move on.
And we move on. And once we book our trip and we have that time, because I'm a big quality time person and that's what I want for my relationship, and my husband is willing to do it. Once we have that booked, then we'll look at TVs. Just saying.
That was a good way to.
So I know we could talk all day about all this stuff, Bernadette, and thank you so much for joining us today. But where can the listener find you if they want to learn more about your resources?
Yes. Well, thank you so much for having me. This was so much fun. You can head to crushyourmoneygoals.com. There you can find the new book. It's coming out in this December, and it's a 25 smart habits that anyone can use to reach financial independence based off of my own journey and all of the people that I've worked with. We are also hosting free workshops for anyone, so you can head to crushyourmoneygoals.com and sign up for one of those free workshops. And if you like listening to my voice on this podcast, you can also check out the audiobook. It's going to be on Audible. And then lastly, if you just want to say hi, you can just DM me on primarily Instagram and LinkedIn at Bernadette Joy, spelled with the word debt, if you're trying to figure out which one is me.
I love it. Well, thank you, Bernadette, for being here today. And that's all, listeners. Until next time. Thank you for taking the time to listen to our discussion. To learn more about me and the Modern Legal team, go to our website, modernlegalnc.com, or check out the links in our show notes to follow us on Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn, and YouTube. You can also call us at 704-286-6302. If you have been intrigued by the conversation and would like us to continue our discussions, please subscribe to the podcast and leave us a review. See you next time.